Okay, tov everybody. Hope all is well. As you can see from the background, I'm in a different location again. Let me move this here. It's fine. Um, Baby is sleeping nicely, quietly downstairs, but if she starts to wake up, I don't want to disturb anybody. Besides, she's learned Mesilat Yesharim more recently than any of us. Okay, today's learning. Also for Shlema for Adina Bat Miriam. Also, it should be Le'ili Nishmat Chaya Dobrish Bat Rachel Leah. That's Rhonda's grandmother. And for Shlema for Ram Chaim Ben Leah Chasha and Noah Bat Shimrit. Tov, we are at the beginning of Parak Kaf Aleph 21. And we spent a decent amount of time, of course, all the way starting in Parak Yud Tet. We spent months between Yud Tet and Kaf talking about Chassidut, achieving piety. And last week we talked about assessing it. How do we know we're doing it the right way? So what we're going to do today is to see, how do you achieve it? How do you acquire that character trait of Chassidut? Now, I will remind you, he does this with almost every single chapter after he's discussed or topic. After he's discussed a particular event, he'll then also talk about the idea of how do you achieve it? How do you acquire it? The reason being, I think it's obvious, but I should still say it, is that it's all great in theory to know what you're supposed to do. I know I'm supposed to learn. I know I'm supposed to eat. I know I'm supposed to go to work. I know I'm supposed blah, 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 blah. I get a job description when I go to school or to the office at the accountant's office or wherever I might be working. And I know what I'm supposed to do, but how do I do it? So years ago, and some of you know this, way before I was shul rabbi, I worked for many years in the business world. I was a director of purchasing for a manufacturer, two actually, one for 17 years and one for a couple of years. And in my second year there, I had been hired to be kind of like do cost accounting, even though I wasn't an accountant. And in my second year there, the person who was running the purchasing department was let go. And the boss came to me and said, "Okay, you're now the new purchasing director." What did I know from purchasing? I hate shopping. I still to this day hate shopping, except it's for Svarim books and electronics. So I had to kind of learn on the job. And then I asked to be sent to some courses because I wanted to know how to do my job properly. And the title of this one course was called The Newly Appointed Purchasing Director. Okay, so I come to the course, and the guy who's giving the course said there's no such thing as the newly appointed, it's the newly anointed. You're just told one day you're a purchasing director. And everyone in the room laughed because every single one of us was in the same boat. No one in that particular group, it was about 30 of us, happened to work his way up from a purchasing agent to become a purchasing. So it's like you found out all overnight. So it's nice to be given a list of what it is, what's your job. I know I'm supposed to buy this stuff for the company, but how do I do it? So the same thing here. We have been talking at great length about Chassidut, but how do we achieve it? How do we acquire it? Okay, so we're starting Parak Kaf Aleph, chapter 21. That which will help a tremendous amount to acquire Chassidut, ugodel hahistaklut v'rov hahitbonenut. You need to engage your brain. You need to think. You need to be aware. You need to be hitbonen. You need to also do introspection. And what is it you're supposed to think about? We'll see shortly. Adam hitbonen al godel romemuto yitbarach v'tachlit shlemut. The more you think about the grandeur of Hashem, and you start to conceive and start to understand the gigantic, you can't even call it a gap. It's like comparing apples and stars. The difference between where we are, who we are, no matter how great a person might be, and the greatness of Hashem, we see that discrepancy. So one of the first things what may cause a person to do is to be in a sense of trepidation, fear, awe in the face of such grandiosity. It's not the right word. Of magisterial greatness, maybe. Now, so that's maybe the first part. Then you start realizing all the things that Hashem does, all the chesed he does for us 24/7, 365 days a year. How much he loves Israel, not just the land of Israel, but Bnei Israel. And how he likes to bring those who are on the straight and narrow to come closer to him. You will certainly be overcome by a burning love for God, and you'll choose and desire to cling to him. Now, just parenthetically, once again, it happens to us quite a bit that the topic in Tanya that we do and the topic we're doing in Mesilat Yesharim tend to dovetail. This happens to be exactly the topic we're dealing with last night and will next time as well, of this love of Hashem and how does one bring that to the fore. But he's saying like this, imagine, look, we have right now, Baruch Hashem, right now downstairs in my house, I have a 7-day-old baby. That baby does not know anything other than she wants to cry, she wants to fill her diaper, she wants to eat, and somehow some magical being supplies all her needs, right? She cries, someone picks her up eventually, not right away, hopefully. She fills her diaper, someone changes her. She's uncomfortable, she's hot, she's cold, it's taken care of. She has no concept, no clue. There's not even a shred of, oh, thank you, mommy. Thank you, Abba. Nothing like that, because there's no concept yet of that. As the child gets a little bit older, what do we say to a child very often when they're a couple years old, and hopefully even before that, you're training them. Someone gives you something. What do you say? Ma'omrim toda. Thank you very much. Why? Because part of what we need to do is to always recognize when someone does something for us, as little as holding the door for us, and as great as it may be as giving a job to a person. If it's not been made clear to you before, Yehudim, named for Yehuda, where does it come from? Because we know that when Yehuda is born, his mother says, Pam odet Hashem, which, by the way, turns out to be a negative thing. That's okay. This time I will give praise and thanks to God, right? Hoda'ah. We are Jews who are always modim. We're always, in a sense, trying to be thankful for what we have. If someone were to ask, and I've asked this before, to ask you, for what do we have to thank Hashem? The answer is everything. What do we get from Hashem? The answer is everything. There's nothing we do, experience, see, feel, receive that isn't from Hashem. The only thing that isn't, quote, from Hashem is what we choose to do in life. And even then, sometimes it is from Hashem. So we understand that the Hashem's involvement. Knows, why am I able to talk right now? Why am I able to breathe? Why am I able to blink my eyes? Only because Hashem wants me to be able to do that right now. There's a famous story in the Gemara, which you quoted already in Mesilat Yesharim and in other places, of a woman who went to light her candles. I think it was Rabban Gamliel's wife, but I don't remember for sure. She went to light her candles for Shabbat, and she realized that instead of pouring in oil, she poured vinegar, and that's all she had. And so her husband said this, the one who said, meaning Hashem, that oil should light, he should also enable the vinegar to light. And it lit. Why? Why do oil and water not mix? Not because you can tell me the properties and the chemistry of it, which is true, but it's because Hashem doesn't want them to mix. Because we're able to understand the concept, therefore, of oil and water not mixing, and that the Jews are compared to the oil because we rise to the top. All kinds of reasons. But it only is because that's what Hashem wants. When we start to realize that, we start to think about it. Imagine for a moment a person's, God forbid, in a car accident, and someone comes along and saves their life. So it's not going to be just shkoyach, tiskele mitzvot, have a nice day. I mean, if that person had been in very severe danger, then that one would have like been gushing and constantly trying to say thank you and invite them to Sudat Hoda'ah. Hashem deserves a Sudat Hoda'ah constantly. But we don't give him food. We give him our love. We give him our care and our connection and our heart. When we realize that God is really, truly our Father, and he has mercy on us like a parent on a child, just like a child wants to recompense his parent and thank his parent and desires to be close to the parent, so too we should want, in that kind of sense, to be close to Hashem. So the first thing he says, in the general sense, is you have to engage your mind. You have to think about what it is. But how? So we talked about briefly before the topic of hitbodedut, and he's going to talk about this a little bit more, but not as much as Rabbi Nachman. So Rabbi Nachman talks about this at length. And again, for those of you who don't have the book called Bistei Ya'ar by Rav Arush, it's available in English, in the forest to the field of the forest. I never remember what it's called in English. He has a whole section on hitbodedut and what you do and all. It is truly magnificent. Here he just gives us a little drop of this. Person should spend time alone. Think. It could be in your room, as they talk about in doing hitbodedut. It could be in your bedroom. It could be in your car. It could be at a field. It could be at a park. But the idea is being boded, alone, sitting by yourself with your thoughts. You want to put music, you put music. Whatever it is that gets you into this frame of mind to think. You have to, in my words, not his, focus on all these things. What does that mean? Let's say, for example, you're having an issue, you're having a problem with your family, you're having a problem with health, God forbid, whatever it might be. So maybe your hitbodedut will focus on Hashem and helping you figure something out. But also, just as importantly, it's trying to ask Hashem for the help to not to figure him out, but to work on this relationship. We talk about couples counseling, we talk about, parent-child issues, we talk about sibling rivalry, and it's all a matter of zugiyut or relationships. But we have a relationship. We have a relationship with Hashem. And to cultivate it means no different and even more so than a regular relationship with another human being. If you don't work at a relationship, you don't work at it, and when there's problems, you don't talk about them, you don't do something about it, the relationship is not going to last. It may last, but it won't be a good relationship. We have a relationship with Hashem. Hashem says, I want that relationship with you. I'll remind you of something I said already at least 2 or 3 times. On the regular weekday tachanun, which we stopped as of tomorrow, because we have a month of no tachanun with Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It says, Poteach yad b'tshuva. Hashem opens his hand, and he wants a person to do tshuva. You want to do tshuva? Come. I'm here. Come to me. Here's my hand. And then we go through the time period, starting in Elul of Slichot, Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yemei Tshuva, Yom Kippur. We have Kol Nidre, Mariv, Shacharit, Musaf, Mincha, Ne'ilah. And we come to Ne'ilah after a 40-day period of time from Rosh Chodesh Elul. And at the very end of Ne'ilah, we come to the following statement, referring to Hashem, Hanotein Yad Laposhim. Hashem doesn't just open his hands, he stretches his hands out and he tries to take us by the hand. Hashem wants us to do the right thing. Hashem wants this relationship. And to think about that in your hitbodedut, and when you're alone, and to think about it, and what's going to help you. So he gives us an idea. He says, in his opinion, and by the way, again, Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Arush expand on this much, much greater than just this one line. He says Tehillim would be very helpful. Now, for some people, it may be. For others, it would be, for them, just it wouldn't help them at all. And I'm not talking just reading the Tehillim just by rote, but it means thinking about what David HaMelech said. Like, for example, the concept to look into the Shamayim and ask yourself, Mi bara ele, who created all this? To make yourself and to use the Shamayim, use the Aretz, everything else that David talks about. And considering them and thinking about them and pondering them, all the things that are said in Tehillim. Now, again, it doesn't work for everybody. I can guarantee you 100% that it does not work for 100% of people. Okay? 100%, I'm positive of that. But a person has to find what works for them, what's good for them, what will help them focus, what will help them meditate, what will help them connect to something that's very difficult to do when you think about it, and something else on the other side, it's actually very simple. Because by doing so, it becomes filled with the love and the awe and all forms of piety for Hashem. As he considers these things, thinks about them, lo yimana mehitorer bo hitorut gadol, latzet bi'ikvotav v'lalechet bidrachav. This causes an awakening. This is the brain and the heart starting to work together, where you start to awaken your mind. You start to bring up these thoughts and these feelings. If you can think back to the moment, I actually can. If you can think back to the moment where you realized that you loved somebody, spouse, before they were your spouse, child, it's almost instantly, I would hope. But even with, let's say, the spouse, you go from a point where maybe you're dating, and one day you maybe have this like, wow, I really love her, or I really love him. There's this switch that gets turned. What was the reason? Ask someone why they love their spouse. What is it that you love about your spouse? If it's all about, well, she makes me breakfast and she buys me clothes and she does this and she does this. So you're just a mekabel. You're just a recipient of stuff. Okay, so it could just be a person living with you who does all those things for you. What's the love? Where does that come from? And that's what he's talking about here when it comes to Hashem. What is it that we love? What can we love about Hashem? The answer is if we realize that we can't take a breath without Hashem's will, and when we realize that Hashem provides the sustenance for every being, everything on this earth, whether it's mosquitoes, which Awi Mavatera, he doesn't have to provide them anything, although they do some good. And for us, it makes a very big difference in our beginning to connect more with Hashem. I happen to enjoy this. I don't do it very often, but I do like, is reading Masech Hasidim, Hasidic stories. I'm not talking about Tevi the milkman. I'm talking about stories of a Hasidic Rebbe, maybe, or, from, I'll give you an example. This isn't a story per se. Our granddaughter's name is Eliraz Noam, the new one. And the word Noam, the name Noam, is that she was born on the yard site of the Hilulah of the Noam Elimelech, Noam Elimelech Milezhansk. And there is a skula that if a woman is in labor, and they take the sefer, the Noam Elimelech, and put it under the pillow, that it's supposed to help for an easy, quick delivery. And interestingly enough, our daughter tried and put it under her pillow. And she came to the hospital. She was far away from being ready to deliver. Thank God, really not having too much in the way of terrible tzirim, contractions. And then after a bunch of hours just laying there, she went from 0 to 60. She went from like barely being dilated to having a baby in about 25 minutes, and no epidural, no anything. And like it was 1, 2, 3. So that doesn't mean that this skula worked. It could just mean that that's a coincidence. I don't know. Who knows? No one can say for sure. They named the baby Noam, part of the second name for that. But then the stories of all these Hasidic masters and things they've done and how they're able to understand something. And thank you very much. Mimi posted about forest fields. It's very good. You can get it in almost any bookstore, by the way, even in the like something like Steinmetzky, but for sure in the Jewish books, the Hebrew bookstores. And when we start to listen to these kind of stories and be impacted by them, if you read the Torah tidbits, there's one man, I think his last name is Michel, Mishel, I think is his name. In the beginning of his article every week, he gives a little Sipur Hasidi. And I find them fascinating. They don't have to be 50 pages long. Be sometimes 2 or 3 paragraphs, but they are inspiring. Doesn't mean that's who we're going to be, but it means like, wow, this is amazing what Hashem can do through a person. Now, how come he has this neshama and I don't have the neshama? And you have to learn Tanya. You come back. Because what it does is it allows us to then say, well, I may not be able to do that, but I can strive for this. I'll give you one example in my own life. There is a story, it's been told in a few different ways, but the general story is about the Brisker Rav, Chaim Brisk, who was the beginning of the Brisk dynasty, the Soloveitchik dynasty, that a woman came to him, Erev Pesach, and she went to his gabbai, instead of the person being able to go straight to the Rebbe, he wasn't a Hasidish, but this is just a good story. She went to his gabbai, his right hand man, his shamus, and said, "I need to talk to the Rebbe, to the Rav." And she says, "What's the question?" She says, "Well, I want to know if I can make kiddush for the 4 kosot tonight for the seder on milk." So he said, "Okay, wait here. Let me go inside." So he goes to the Rav Salvage, to the Rav Chaim. He said, "There's a woman outside who's obviously disturbed. She really doesn't know very much. She wanted to know if she's able to make the arba kosot with milk." And so the Rav Chaim says, "You really think that's her question?" Well, that's what she said. It's not her question. She's too embarrassed to ask for money for chicken. So she said, "By the way, I'm obviously not having chicken because I want to know if I can drink milk instead of wine." Now, that story I heard at least 30 years ago. And I cannot tell you how many times that story has helped me personally when someone's asked me a question. They need help with something. When I hear them ask one question and I dig a little bit and I say, I don't think myself, that's not their question. It's helped me many, many, many times. And I think that this is also what we're talking about here. And you can hear these stories. You may not be able to be the person who's going to be this, Hasidic master who's going to tell. You won't be. We won't be. We're not that. We're not there. But at least you can understand and learn from that and grow in the area of being the Hasid personality. But Masidei Hasidut. Now, and when he does a chapter on the Kniyah, on the acquisition of a midah, a character trait, he always does the flip side. Though, now this is how you can do it. She talked about basically it's hitbonenut, thinking and reading. But then he talks about the other side of what could mess you up, what can stop that from working. Which we would say in normal modern day English, life gets in the way. We can sometimes wake up and have all kinds of great plans. Today's the day I'm gonna start to learn X. Today's the day I'm gonna pick up the phone and call someone I haven't called in a long time to see how they're doing. Whatever it might be. Person is busy with the day-to-day life and their worries and their businesses and their whatever they have to do. It's almost impossible to find the time, he says, to do this proper introspection. Now, having said that, let's talk about that sentence for a minute. What do you mean, it is impossible? Not. It's absolutely not. A person may think it's impossible. I have students who will tell me, "Oh, because right now is Bagrut season. It's the winter Bagriot and soon will be the summer Bagriot." You're like, "I don't have any time to study for the Bagrut. All I can do is I can sit with you now and I can sit with you later. I don't have time to study on my own." I said, "Oh, really? Interesting. Tell me, what do you do when you get home?" "Well, I go to my PlayStation, I play games, and then what? I sometimes take a nap, and then maybe I go work. I do my waiter somewhere. Very nice. And then I come home and I'm playing my computer for a little while. And around 12:30, I go to sleep." So let me ask you a question. Do you think, and I've asked this of adults and kids, do you think that in that 7.5 to 12 to 9 hours of time, you can find 15 minutes to do something? Well, yeah, of course. So don't tell me you don't have the time. People tell themselves all the time, "I don't have the time to do blah, blah, blah." Look, if you say to me, "Why don't you go out and get a degree in psychology and psychiatry, become a doctor, or learn to be a concert violinist," which I want to do. I don't have the time. Well, some things maybe I really don't have the time because it's a tremendous amount of investment of time. But we're not talking a tremendous amount of investment of time. We're talking about a small amount of time. It could be a few minutes. But Rabbi Nachman says your goal is to try an hour a day. That's a lot for most people, and probably for most people. But it means that instead of saying, "I'm going to sit here and focus on what's bothering me, I'm going to focus on the negative, I'm going to focus on how am I going to make the rent, how am I going to have food on the table," which is a very legitimate tirdah. It's a very legitimate thing that keeps you occupied. Maybe start to reconnect a little bit with Hashem. That may help also through the hitbodedut. Listen to this one line though. I have this underlined in my book. Umibli hitbonenut lo yasig hachasidut. He says this as we say chad mashmai. This is a statement he makes with no qualification. If you don't do hitbonenut, this contemplation and this thought process, you will not achieve a level of Hasidut. Nikudat. If I'm going to put it in different terms, if I want to be a doctor and I don't go to medical school, I'm not going to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in my teens. Thank goodness I didn't become a lawyer. I want to be president. No, I don't want to be president. Whatever it might be. But if there's everything you want to do, if it's more than just I want to eat, there's a process you have to go. Well, even then, I come into my house, let's say, and this is always food. Baruch Hashem, never lacking. Baruch Hashem. Let's assume for a moment absolutely every cabinet is empty and the fridge is empty. Let's pretend it's Erev Pesach. Everything's empty. And I'm really hungry. Now, I can either just sit there and cry that I don't have anything to eat, or I can do something about it. I can go to a neighbor, I can go to the store. But you have to do something in order to achieve something. It doesn't just fall from the sky. We don't live in a time of man coming down from Shemayim. So he says the same thing is true with Hasidut. You could be a good person. You could be a Hasid wannabe. You can change if you could read chapter 19, for a couple of months and learn more what it means to be a Hasid and do all that. But without the hitbonenut /hitbonenut, the contemplation and spending the time alone and trying to really contemplate and building this love of Hashem, you're not going to reach the level of a true Hasid. But let's say you did. You did your hitbonenut and you did hitbonenut and you really did get to a point where you have achieved chapter 19, right? Life gets in the way again. It messes him up a little bit. It prevents him from giving himself strength or getting strength in his yirah, in Havat Hashem. Says, yes, you maybe achieve, you get to 100%. You get the gold star of being the Chassid. You even get a little badge that says, hi, my name is Zev, I'm a Chassid. But as time goes on, it wears off if you don't work at it. What's the name of Yitzhak Perlman? Yitzhak Perlman was asked something about practicing his violin. He still practices every single day. And basically he said that if he doesn't practice for one day, he can tell the difference. If he doesn't practice for 3 days, the audience can tell the difference. And it's a whole shita about what he does, how he talks about it. But this is Yitzhak Perlman, right? One of the best violinists probably that ever lived. And yet he still has to practice all the time because he's always sharpening his skills. He doesn't want to just rely on that. A person who's a professional, whatever their profession is, that's one of the reasons they also have professional courses to maybe there are things you don't know, maybe things you've forgotten and you need to, maybe the laws have changed. Whether you're an accountant, a psychologist, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it might be, there's always new things. There's always more. And when it comes to Torah, when it comes to that, it also has the downside. If you don't work at it, you forget it. You lose it or you use it or you lose it. How many people learned, let's say up until grade 10, grade 11, then knew Parshat Shavua, and they knew the Ramban's explanation of a pasuk, and then they go 30 years, they don't know the Chumash. Okay? Are they going to remember certain things to be all the way back in the back of their head? Yeah, maybe. But is it polished? Is it ready to use? No, it's not. Therefore, the Chachamim said, Ein hashchina shora lo mitoch atzvut, lo mitoch atzlut, lo mitoch sechok, lo mitoch kalut rosh. The Shekhinah does not rest in a place where there's sadness, laziness, frivolity, lightheadedness. Ela mitoch davar simcha shel mitzvah. When we're involved in keeping Torah, that's what brings the Shekhinah. Does that mean you're not supposed to laugh? No. Does it mean you can't be sad? No. Of course you can be sad, you can be angry, you can have all the emotions you want. It's unhealthy to not. When they get extreme, that's the problem. That's when it becomes a problem. But you know yourselves that if for some reason you're depressed about something, or you're upset about something, or you have something on your mind, you're not going to be able to focus on what needs to be focused on, let alone sit there and trying to contemplate Hashem. And even more so, when we forget about your own emotional state, even if you're in a great emotional state, but getting involved in all kinds of other things, whether it's you're allowed to do other things. You're allowed to have recreation. But if that becomes your ikar, that messes up your the Torah part and the Hasidut part. Because they seduce the heart to go after them. Just one more episode. Just one more episode. And it will turn you away from the completely from all this idea of prishut, of the separation, trying to become this level of chassid. Now, when we got to chapter 11, a long time ago, I told you that from pretty much chapter 11 to the end of the book, we're talking about a very small percentage of people who can accomplish everything in the book. But it doesn't prevent us from trying a little bit of every chapter. Same thing is true here. We all have hobbies. We all have things that we may like to read, may like to watch movies, take a walk, exercise, tea, whatever it might be. But if that becomes the focus of everything, and we don't ever spend that amount of time, even some of the time, on what's important, what's more, just as, if not more important, of course, this relationship building with Hashem, then there's no way you can even think about coming even close to chapters 19, 20, and 21. Won't happen. So what's another thing that's going to help you in this particular journey? What he told us what can drive you away, what can cause you to not be a chassid and do this hitbonenut and all that. But there's something you can do, and that is bitachon. I'm going to come back to this. We're going to read what he says here, and I'll probably not do it today, but next time, which will be right after Pesach, Bezrat Hashem. He says, what will help you tremendously is bitachon. I'm going to just translate it now as relying on Hashem. It's a very general term. What we'll talk about, not today, is going to be the difference between bitachon and emunah. I came across a phenomenal article back on Pesach, which I have right next to me, from Rav Ginsburg, Shlita, which I'll explain to you who he is when we do this. And he, in very short order, explained the difference between emunah and bitachon, which we will talk about, Bezrat Hashem. But right now, let's just use it as just a relying on Hashem translation. Turn it over to Hashem. Put it in God's hands. It's not working. Put it in God knows what he's doing. I heard in Rav Arusha's Sefer that I mentioned before, he asks, have you ever been on a bus, on a regular bus, and gone up to the driver and say, do you know what you're doing? Do you know where you're driving exactly? Do you know how to get to the destination? We don't do that. Why? Because we assume the bus driver knows where he's going. The guy that has been paid and trained for years to drive, maybe driving like a psychopath, but that's a different story. But we trust these guys. And yet, and I mentioned this also, George Carlin, he crazy guy, but a comedian, he said he was an atheist. He said, I don't understand. People are willing to believe in some big man in the sky with a big long white beard, but when it says wet paint, they have to touch it because they don't believe it, right? So when we really have this trust in Hashem that things are going to happen, whatever it is going to be, it's going to be the will of Hashem. That's a tremendous calming factor. Because we can never think that we're not going to get what is due to us. As it says in Masachet Beitzah, Kol mizonotav shel adam tzuvim lo mirosh Hashanah. What you are going to have in your bank account, on your shelves, in your house, food-wise, on Erev Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Pei Daled, is decided already on Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Pei Gimel. Well, wait a minute. If that's the case, what should you do? Go out and play baseball, play video games, go do whatever. Why do you have to go to work? It's been set in stone, dude. It's already taken care of. Why do I have to worry about it? We'll see in a second. You cannot touch that which is set aside for your friend, even one little thread. What does that mean? If it's not meant for you, it's meant for your friend, because that's how Hashem set it up, you're not going to get it. So that says, wait a minute. Why not? You just sit around, do nothing. You're supposed to have 5 million shekel in your bank account. At the end of the year, you're going to get it. It was already set aside. It was taken care of already. If it were not for the fine that all of us have to pay, which it is, Adam messed it up for us. What happened? He and Chava ate from the tree, the Eitz Hadat, and the punishment of Adam Arishon was by the sweat of your brow you have to eat. We have to do our part. We have to do what's called in English hishtadlus. We have to put our effort in. Does not mean a person might think that if instead of a 40-hour work week, they put in 73 hours, that they're going to make so much more money. It's going to be so much better for them. Now, tachlis, they may get more money, but whether they put in the 40 hours or the 73 hours may, in the long run, not make any difference. If that's what is katsuv, that's what's been set up, that's his person's going to receive. How do you know? You don't know. Sheken gazar melech alyon. It's kind of like this tax that God has put on all humanity that we have to pay. You can't get away from it. Therefore they said, you might think you could just sit and the Hashem's word will happen and you're going to get what you're going to get. You have to do your part. Now, what does that mean, your part? What does it involve? Does not mean that hishtadlut is that which caused all this to happen, but it's necessary. When you do your part, you did your part. And then you open the gates, so to speak, for Hashem to rest his blessing on you. You don't have to spend your day and nights going crazy and overworking yourself to the bone, because Hashem is already going to provide. But David said, it's not coming from the west, the east. It's not coming from the mountains, the desert and the mountains. God is the judge. He will lower someone. He will raise someone. Shlomo HaMelech amar, Shalom amar, al tiga v'ashir mimidatcha chadal. Derech amiti hu darkam shel hachasidim harishonim. But the real true way is the path of the Hasidim harishonim. What did they do? Osim toratan ikar, mlachtan tefillah. They would make their Torah the main part of their life, and their work secondary. And both end up happening, which means that a person should work to make their wages. A person should work to earn a living. But Torah still has to be the ikar. One person did part of his work. From that point on, he only should rely on Hashem. And not be worried about any of the worldly matter. Now, this formula is not simple. Let's assume for a moment a person can live on 8,000 shekel a month. Let's make up a number. 8,000 shekel a month. In theory, what this means is that a person works enough hours to make the 8,000 shekel. If in theory he could work another many hours and now bring home 12,000 shekel, he should spend that 4,000 difference of time learning Torah. Now, is there an argument to be made? No, he should still be working to get that extra 4,000 because it could help his future. Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to better yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. But we're talking about a personality. If I'm not mistaken, it was the Chavetz Chaim who would, I think, that he had, if one of you knows them, please correct me, that he had a makolet, and he would work X amount of hours, and as soon as he made the amount he needed to subsist for his day, he's closed the store. The rest of the time was Torah. It was him or somebody else. And they're not telling those stories about you and me, but they're telling those stories about the Chavetz Chaim. It was him or somebody else of that nature. I do know that when Rav Avadia Zatzal, when he was young, he didn't have any money. He would go into a Sfarim store and ask just to sit in the back of his store and just learn from the Sfarim that were in the store because he couldn't buy them. And he did that instead of working at some point. Obviously, he built an empire eventually. Again, this is not an easy formula. But to kind of l'sakem, what is it we talked about? That you have to do a couple things, and they go hand in hand. One is finding the time for spending time with yourself. to really contemplating. There's many things one can contemplate, but in this particular chapter, we're talking about a way to grow this love with Hashem and various methods to do so. And number two, what to watch out for, what are the pitfalls, and how to circumvent those pitfalls. Bezrat Hashem, we'll continue right after Pesach, and we'll pick it up with this idea of what is the difference between bitachon and emunah, because they sound like they're almost interchangeable, and people use them interchangeably, but there is definitely a difference. And even within the area of bitachon, there's different gradations. In the meantime, I wish you all a Chag Sameach v'Kasher wherever you're going to be, and have a great Chag. Dust is not chametz. Okay, you want to do spring cleaning? Go ahead. We did. And just enjoy the Chag, Bezrat Hashem. I'll see you, Bezrat Hashem, after Pesach. And be well. Stay healthy. It's in order. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Amen.